Uh, Stable dynasties, when China gets into trouble, they ask, what would Confucius do? And these Confucian scholars are so very good that they prop up these long dynasties. Also, this is where I was, the Silk Road makes it over to Rome. It also is connected into, what is that trade route I wrote on all your essays to mention in Africa? Trans-Sahara trade route. The gold salt, I don't care, but just put something about Sahara and gold and salt in there. So we're going from the Atlantic Ocean, like Timbuktu, all the way through. If you don't know, you can always ask them a question. Excellent, Kate. All the way over to Asia by land and by water. When we have these big empires, when we've got like the Han Dynasty, the Tang and Song Dynasty, the Byzantine Empire, Rome, it's safe to trade and travel over land. But all of a sudden we get the things like the Crusades. We get the expansion of the Mongols, and do you want to go over land anymore? No, you might die. So the water route has become even more important, because when those regional empires break down or fall apart, stuff gets cut off, all right? You know, like the hose gets kinked. So we're going out over the Indian Ocean at this time. But because of all of this, coming out of the Middle East comes the idea of using a paper currency. Rather than carrying a giant bag of gold and silver around, we can now use paper. It's cheaper to make, it's portable, and it's safer. Also, coming are the ideas of using checks and credit. I will write you a check for money in my account in a bank. All of this comes as a result of Arabic trading and trading with India. Checks, credit, banking, deposits, different branches. All of this will come to China during the Tang and Song dynasties. Communication naturally gets better with outside groups, cultural diffusion. The one crazy thing is this is the era where the policy of foot binding becomes big. If you remember my review video where they take a young girl's foot and they break and bend the toes over and then wrap them tight because that looks like a tulip petal or a flower. How that's a good idea, I have absolutely no clue. And aristocratic women couldn't move because it hurt their feet. Peasant women, however, didn't have to be foot-bound because they were out like mucking in the fields. There is a very entertaining yet not very historically accurate Netflix show called Marco Polo. And in it, the emperor's young niece, and he doesn't like his sister, to get back at his sister, he like foot binds his niece, and you can hear her toes breaking. And I'm like, is that really necessary? They don't know why that was a good idea, but they thought it was back in the Tang Song Dynasty. So anyway. All right. Now, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Knocking on the door of China for thousands of years was the Mongols. And finally, the door is kicked in, and there is Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan is now the emperor of China. He's a Mongol. He's done it in 1279. This is the foreign dynasty. But he doesn't want the Mongols to get absorbed into Chinese society. Remember, barbarians, 90% of the time, like the Hyksos invading Egypt, when they conquer a more civilized person or group, they become civilized. The Mongols are warriors. We ride our ponies for days. We slit our horses' veins and drink their blood. And we're Mongol warriors, and we don't need sleep and we don't need rest, and we're Mongols. If we start living in China, we'll be wearing silk and sleeping in like feather beds, and we won't be husky and buff and like brutal anymore. We won't be like a bro anymore. All right? We'll lose our edge. So he says, I want to keep Mongols and these sophisticated, technologically advanced Chinese separate. And he tries as hard as he could. And because he's Kublai Khan, he wants to keep conquering. His family's got pretty much all of Asia. They're up into Russia. And he wants Japan. Right? I got to be like these Han guys. And he launches 2 invasions of Japan, 1274 and 1281. Both of them are sunk by hurricanes. So he doesn't ever get Japan. However, part of the Mongol dynasty will make its way up into Russia. Well, they will mix with the Vikings and the Russians, and they will convert to Islam, where they will form a group known as the Golden Horde. And the Golden Horde will open up the northern part of Europe and Asia and connect it to the Silk Road. So the Mongols will increase trading. Also, the Mongol Empire was completely safe. A young fair maiden, all right, and a poppy could put a pot of gold on their heads and walk the length of Asia and never have to worry about bandits, because if you did something and the Mongols got a hold of you, anybody remember, have a good day, Clara, anybody remember their 2 methods of execution?
Oh, the horses on the arms.
Right. They stampede the horses over you, or tie your arms and legs to horses, and you become a human weeble wobble, or like Bowie, all right? Because you no longer have arms and legs. So anyway, it would hurt really bad. Maybe tied one to your head too. So, they're Mongols. So anyway, couple of the Mongol armies begin to convert to Islam, especially a guy named Burke. And Burke will fight his cousin in the Middle East for supremacy. And a descendant of his is that young man Tamerlane, who will conquer the southern part. Mongols boomerang over, conquer the southern part of Asia, helping to further the spread of Islam. Tamerlane didn't, but everyone else did. Unfortunately, because of the Mongol conquest, they do lengthen and improve the Silk Road, but they also help spread the Black Plague, which will devastate Europe and Asia. This also time Renaissance, Aztecs, Incas, all right, Songhai, Zimbabwe over in Africa. And this brings us to the great Ming Dynasty. Ming Dynasty, age of absolutism. Louis XIV, Peter the Great, Suleiman, Akbar, all those characters. All right. Age of exploration. All right. Transatlantic trade, Columbian exchange, mercantilism. All of that is going on during the great Ming Dynasty. Remember, what fuels absolutism in Europe? Transatlantic trade. So if the transatlantic trade is fueling absolutism in Europe, it's going on during this time as well. The Ming Dynasty is the last of the great Chinese dynasties. It is known as the Pax Romana of China, as it is a 600-year period of unprecedented peace and prosperity throughout China. During this time, there is this massive population boom. A laissez-faire economy is practiced. The people are given iron tools. New fertilizers and irrigation techniques are used. So China's population explodes. They've got 8 or 9 cities that have a population of 1 million people or more. They're enormous. As a result of this, China breaks up into 7 or 8 regional states that allows them to harness their entire national economy. and they begin to set up senshi banks where you can deposit silver. Let's say in Chapel Hill, you could travel all the way to Boston, show your certificate, show how much silver you deposited in Chapel Hill, and get it out of the bank in Boston. It makes trading and traveling much easier throughout all of China. To show how awesome we are, like we like to do in the age of absolutism, the Chinese don't just build a palace, they build an entire city known as the Forbidden City, where they ran their centralized government from. To do this, they needed tribute, so they expand the empire and they go out to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Myanmar, Burma, India, and they ask for the best thing that you have. And if it's really nice, you can trade with China or become part of China. If it stinks, well, then they'll just conquer you because you're a scrub. And this is the time that Zhang Ho will take out his massive fleet of 68 large trading ships that they could decorate like butterflies and dragonflies and serpents, and just terrify and inspire awe in villagers. A ship of Zhang Ho's would have swallowed up a Spanish galleon from the Armada, the European equivalent at the time. And the Ming emperors bring back Confucius and the concept of filial piety. If everybody plays their role, we're going to do fine, all right? If we run box, bros, and everybody plays their role, we're going to win, all right? But you got to trust the system, all right? UVA basketball, whatever. They are an absolutist empire, make no mistake about it. The emperor is in charge. But here's where they start to train their Confucian scholars. You start out in the small village, and if you do well in your evaluations, then you can take the next test for the small, mid-sized towns. So we're linking, Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, the farmland, to Pittsburgh, the regional city. If you do well in Pittsburgh, then you can take the large metropolitan test, where you could govern a Philadelphia and New York, or even work for the emperor directly. So there's an unbroken chain from the metropolitan East Coast to the interior and back. It links everybody. So think of like our East Coast to the Midwest and back. So near the end, China says, you know what? We're doing very well. We'll welcome traders along the Silk Road. We'll kind of welcome you, but we want to be kind of on our own. And because some traders showed up, our Portuguese friends, shockingly, and behaved badly, foreign traders were restricted to the port in Canton, where you could get off on that little island or spit of land, do your trading, but you could not enter mainland China. All right, Qing Dynasty, last Chinese dynasty, 1600 up to 1911. So this is going to be the period of the Industrial Revolution, the revolutions, nationalism, imperialism, all the isms we've been talking about exist here in the Qing Dynasty. And as powerful as the Ming were, the Qing are just, they just fade like the night. They just don't have it. Yes, sir.
So essentially they were just,
Just All right. And at the end, really like, All right. So, they experienced the heyday of European imperialism. And flying the flag are our good old British friends. And as you will see tomorrow in India, once the British gets their hooks into you, you were done. Remember how they got the Indians to fight each other in India and North America, North American Navy? Well, they do, and they're really good at this. But instead of getting the Chinese to fight each other, we'll do something even better. We'll get them all, like, doped out of their mind. Hey, we got this stuff, this medicine called heroin. You'll really like it. You give me silver, and I'll give you this. All right. So anyway, we'll take poppies from Pakistan and India and give them to you for silver and tea, and we're making money. Oh, God save the Queen spit spot. Sure, you're quick fats and all that. All right, what fish and chips are we going to do now? So, anyhow, the British will carve out a sphere of influence. They will begin to bully their way into China. China had said that they controlled their economy. They controlled what they imported and exported. But the Industrial Revolution is a game changer. And people are able to force their way into China. Once the British get there, the French are hot on their heels. And then the Germans are going to show up. And the Dutch are going to come around with like wooden shoes and tulips or whatever. And all of a sudden, everybody's got a piece of China. The Chinese begin to get angry. They were forced to accept what was known as extraterritoriality. So if a foreigner got in trouble, they were no longer tried by Chinese laws, but by their own. So if Brett and Aaron and Teddy and the Bras go in and cause havoc in Beijing, well, they're going to be judged by Xavier and Grant and Reed and John. Are they going to be found guilty? No. All right, no. All right. Well, even though they're guilty, well, yeah, but, well, those guys are, like, in China, so, like, whatever. And China doesn't like this. They're also told that if foreign businesses, like Japan, are threatened, these foreigners can invade. They can send in their military, and England cuts a deal we're going to hear about, that let's say Sydney charges, she's China, she charges England $5 to $5 import tax. The British are going to import a bunch of heroin poppies into, a bunch of opium poppies into China. She pays $5. Or I pay her $5. Then Zach comes along as France, and he only has to pay her $4.50. Well, because I'm England, no matter what deal Sydney gives Zach, she has to give me the same or a better deal. So if Zach only has to pay $4.50, I now only have to pay $4. All right, no matter what, I always get the best deal out of Sydney. And China is going broke. They're bleeding money. All right, the Europeans are destroying them. And near the end of this period, who comes along? We've been talking about it for days. The Japanese. Excellent. So the people get angry. And in the middle of the dynasty, there is a Taiping rebellion. Taiping rebellion, a priest, a monk, tries to rally the people to fight against the emperor. And 20 million Chinese civilians are killed by their own government. Do you ever hear about it? We do. All right. Taiping's 20, 30 million people just wiped out. So then the Boxer Rebellion comes. The Boxer Rebellion are martial artists who want to get rid of the foreigners during imperialism. And they come in, and this is when the Chinese police and the Japanese fire on them. Their goal is to get rid of the Europeans. And finally, the Chinese decide we must use Western technology to drive them out, and they take on the British in the Opium Wars and in a naval battle, and the Chinese are just pounded. I mean, they're just destroyed. And so this brings us to the early 1900s, where we get the Chinese Republic. Now this can be a lot, guys, all right? This is 3 slides. It's very small. I'm going to try and go fast, but you know a lot of it already. Sun Yat-sen, father of Chinese nationalism, comes in 1911, and he forms the Nationalist Party. And he looks for help. He wants people to help him. He's studied in the West, but World War I has just happened. England, France, economically and financially destroyed. Germany's getting pounded with reparations, and we simply just don't care. So when China asks for help, the one country that helps them out is the Soviet Union. Dear God, was that a mistake or what? And so Chiang Kai Shek, Sun Yat-sen's lieutenant, is sent to the Soviet Union to study for a couple years, and he comes back 4 months later. He says it's really not all that difficult. During this time, the Japanese begin to invade. They're trying to secure resources for their worldwide empire. And to combat against this, and this new Chiang Kai Shek-led government, a guy named Mao Zedong is going to become the key factor in the second Chinese political party known as the CCP, or the Communist People's Party. In 1925 is a crucial year. Sun Yat-sen dies. So Chiang Kai Shek has no one to block his, what he wants to do. The Japanese invade, and China's in a little bit of chaos. Well, Chiang Kai Shek goes out to the wilderness to attack warlords, and all of a sudden he stops and starts hunting the communists. So if I'm China and I'm chasing the communists into the wilderness, right behind me coming out of the Pacific Ocean is the Japanese. So Chiang Kai Shek opens the door for Japan to invade. And Chiang will chase 90,000 people on a 6,000-mile march. By the time they're done, only 20,000 Chinese people survive the 6,000-mile trek. In the middle of it, Japan blows up their own railroad in Manchuria, and Chiang Kai Shek is forced to halt, and the communist and nationalist forces are going to try and slow down the Japanese. And it's during this time, the 20s and early 30s, that Mao Zedong has time to consolidate his power, to weave his magic against the Chinese people. A single spark can start a prairie fire. Don't take anything from the people. Offer to pay for it. If you can't pay for it, work for it. Teach them to read. Teach them to write. Teach them to self-govern. So when World War II is over, the Japanese surrender to Chiang Kai Shek. However, the civil war that follows, by 1949, Mao Zedong wins the Chinese Civil War and gives birth to the People's Republic of China. Many of the rich people, the business owners, the teachers, they flee to the two islands of Hong Kong and Taiwan. It is very similar to the wealthy, educated people of Rome fleeing to Constantinople in the 300s and 400s, right before the collapse. Man, this thing is going to go, so let's get the heck out of here. So, it is during this time that Mao Zedong instills his vision of communism, and he starts what is called the Great Cultural Revolution. Teachers and professors are killed and jailed. Foreign literature is burned. It's just like Shi Huangdi is back in charge. And everybody is going to stay on an equal plane. Anything resembling education or upper middle class, or you are a target, like your own children would turn you in. And this will become known as the Great Leap Forward. In 1958, it's going to allow China to be independent. And Mao Zedong says, I've got a great idea. This is going to help my country be awesome. I'm going to go get Soviet advisors from the Soviet Union. Really, Zach? Really? Come on.
Really?
All right. Well, they try to copy what Joseph Stalin is going to do known as 5-year plans. Quotas are put out. We are going to accomplish this task in 5 years. In the first couple of years, they make gains. They're like, man, we're doing really good. Then they realize the only reason they're making gains is because they've started from so far back. Anything they do looks awesome. But then they meet their quota, but they don't go past it. So there's not enough food for the people to eat. There's not enough electricity. There's not enough clothing. And all of a sudden, people began to starve. Giant villages, communes are created. You have your own school, your own factory, your own house to live in. And each region had to meet one of these quotas. But if you didn't, there is a problem. Well, everybody goes about this. But remember my buddy Bob? Bob, if you're watching this, I'm talking about you. Bob is now in charge. What the heck does Bob know how to do? Run that impact wrench at the GM factory. He doesn't know how to build a road, how to run a factory, how to maintain things. So this is a complete and total disaster. 30 million Chinese people die in the Great Leap Forward. We got 20 in the Taiping Rebellion and 30 in the Great Leap Forward. It was a great leap backward is what it was. And during this time, we're getting rid of all non-communist practices. So in the 50s and 60s, China is in bad shape. The Red Guards, all right, kind of think of the Emperor's bodyguards in Star Wars. They run around and they attack everybody. Professors, business owners, managers, school teachers, everything closes. Thousands of people are fleeing. Everybody's jobless. Some are homeless. And it looks like the Chinese are going to rebel once again. Things don't look good, do they? Well, what do we do in China when that happens? Well, we usually just send in the army. And it's during this time, near the end, the last third of the Cold War, that China and the Soviet Union differ on how communism should run and work. We're going to try something new. And Mao gives more power to the peasant classes. He was looking after Bob. And he said that he took Marxist ideas and he modifies them to meet what China needs. What you Soviets are doing is fine. We're going to do something different. And Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin begin to compete for third world countries. Poor countries after World War II. Stalin and Mao are competing. It's like imperialism to gain support in those colonies. Do what we're doing. Let us help you. And right before he dies, Mao Zedong in 1972, terrible president, but pretty good Secretary of State. Richard Nixon does one of the few good things he did in his life, and that he goes to China in 1972. This is Forrest Gump when Forrest is playing like ping pong, to try and repair relations with China. Mao Zedong dies in 1976, and the people respect him for gaining China back for Chinese, for getting rid of all the foreigners. Yeah, 30 million people died, but you know what? We got rid of all the foreigners. So bully for us. He is replaced by Chairman Deng. Chairman Deng kind of goes old school on it. Like the Han Dynasty, he allows some private businesses, things that were non-essential, you could own your own business and keep the profit from it. And he wants to go what he calls the Four Modernizations. We're going to improve our agriculture. We're going to rebuild our industry. Look at Chinese manufacturing today. We're going to go to work in science and technology. And we're going to build a massive army. It's almost like the three pillars, you know, once again, like back in nationalism. Agriculture, industry, science and technology, or a strong defense, or, remember back in absolutism, how many cabinet members did they speak with every day? 3 or 4. Well, they're right back at it. Once you met the governmental quota, let's say you're a shoemaker and you're given a quota of 500 riding boots. Once Alexi makes her 500th pair of riding boots, she can sell the rest for a profit and keep the money. Due to massive, however, question, Michelle?
Oh, no.
All right. Due to massive population growth to the food and the champa rice, China's population was exploding. So they very kind of, no one thinks about long term. They restrict themselves to the one-child law, where you were not allowed to have more than one child in China. So a lot of young girls, there was a lot of infanticide, a lot of young girls were set up for adoption, as males were always favored in the patriarchal society. Now, 30, 40 years after 1979, people in China looking around going, oh man, there's no girls. I want to get married and I want to have a family. And there's like 12 guys for every young lady. Sweet justice, the young ladies can be, nope, you're an idiot, nope, don't like you, nope, don't like you. They can be very selective because there are no, they're like, oh man, we kind of messed up this, didn't we? Well, sorry guys. Anyway, Chairman Day. By 1980s, the standard of living is going to improve. China is open for tourism, the terracotta warriors, the Great Wall, things like that. And China's students begin to get visas to go out and travel. And they travel to Oxford and Cambridge and England. And we got the great Asian Studies Department down here at UNC. They come to UNC Chapel Hill. They go to Virginia Tech. They go to Georgia. They go to Harvard. They go to UCLA. And the students come back and they're like, dude, you know what the Americans have? This crazy nuts thing they have? William Wallace said it. Freedom! All right? Man, what we could use over here is a little bit of freedom. And so China begins to transition. In 1989, asking for political reforms, we have these guys back here behind Grant and Xavier, the Tiananmen Square, where 100,000 students, and whoever is going to change things, like, Alexi's wearing her hashtag, what's the catchphrase? Enough. Hashtag enough t-shirt. Students are going to be behind the change. And they build like a tinfoil Statue of Liberty and they're rallying and they're screaming. And what do? Well, we normally declare martial law, we send in the army, and brutally put down the protest. My man with his grocery bags were shunted out by the people, but it's widely believed they tracked him down, they got him, and he is well now somewhere. Hopefully he made it out. However, due to this, human rights violations, a couple movies, one made by Christian Bale and some others, China began to loosen up a little bit and to look at the improved human relations. They were granted the Summer Olympics in 2008, especially after Chairman Deng died, and slowly they're becoming capitalistic. They're only communist in name and when it comes to voting, but hopefully that will end soon. Ladies and gentlemen, that is China. Bodhi, John, can you hit stop? You guys have any questions?